Hi, everybody. Welcome to Farm Stress Real Talk. This is our podcast, and today I will be your host. My name is Jill Varner, and I am a food, families, and communities educator located up in Erie County. And I work on the Farm Stress team, and you may have heard me in a couple podcasts before. This one's going to look a little bit different. I don't have anybody that I'm interviewing today, but I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about loss and talking about families. So when I'm out in the community and I'm talking to farmers and I'm talking to community members, it's not too often that I hear farms being talked about kind of in isolation, right? Especially when we're talking about stressors. Very often, families play a huge role in farms, right? They may be multi-generational farms, they may be small and upcoming farms. It could be farms with adult children or young children or aunts and uncles and cousins. Whatever the makeup of the farm is, it definitely seems like I hear farms and families being talked about kind of in sync, right? So I wanted to go through and just talk a little bit about kind of that family structure and what happens when there's stress or crisis and potentially affecting the farm. But let's take that one step further. How does that affect the farm family, right? So I think one of the things to think about really is the family, is the farm family in stress or in crisis? So, family stress, right, is kind of a disturbance in the steady state of a family system, right? And that could emerge from kind of an external context, internal, or possibly even both, right? But that family crisis is really defined that's a pressure that is severe, right? That can occur when a family system is blocked, maybe immobilized, maybe incapacitated because of something that had happened, right? And that means that family members, for whatever reasons, are just not functioning at optimal levels, either psychologically or physically. We've had conversations in the past about how long ongoing stress can really have some physical implications. It's kind of the same when we look at it from a farm family unit. So think about, are you yourself, as part of a farm family or maybe a community member? Are you able to identify what is a stress, maybe what is a crisis? Are you able to name it? This can not only help you kind of reflect on your own situation, but it can also help you as maybe a friend or a distant family member or even a community member really kind of look in and maybe be able to help the farm family a little bit. So there's lots of different stressors and lots of different situations that can affect farm families, right? So some of those are events that really happen inside of that family unit, right? And that can include everything from addiction to suicides, divorce, fear of change. Right? Change is definitely one of those things that's inevitable, but that doesn't mean that we don't stress about it. They can be even external events, right? Think about the weather, floods, droughts, maybe even things like closing of a local milk plant. There's definitely some that are expected, births, marriages, aging. There's even situations that happen that can be absolutely categorized as a crisis, like a young child dying, or maybe an accident or long-term illness that is going to, in hand, kind of affect the farming operations. Things like policies that we've talked about before and low markets can absolutely affect the farm, but also affect the family unit. And that's definitely something that we want to identify and let people know that, if you're somebody that's going through any of these situations or maybe something different altogether, you definitely are going through some stress. And leaning on your family system can be a huge support. And there's a couple of different approaches to working within that family system that are going to strengthen you as a family unit, but also help to strengthen the farm in the long term, especially if this is a family endeavor. So, family discussions are something that are definitely recognized as a best practice, right? Having those conversations, sometimes they can be difficult conversations, but normally the outcomes are always much better if we've taken the time to have these discussions and to have them appropriately, right? So, having those discussions with multiple family members can really help to bring people into common, right? Or shared meetings about family stressors and really start to identify some goals. So, not just kind of releasing that weight of what the stress is, but kind of have a common path to what we want our outcomes to be, right? Not everyone is going to share those same interpretations of risks or concerns, right? And it can really be helpful to allow multiple members of the family, even including children or other non-decision making members, to really share their perspectives. Sometimes in higher states of stress, it's hard to kind of think clearly and it's hard to kind of think of other options or other possibilities. And sometimes getting that input can almost be like a light bulb moment, like, huh, I never thought of that before. Really. So, including a lot of different perspectives can actually be very beneficial. May seem daunting and stressful at first, but may have some very good ultimate outcomes, right? So, kind of some of those steps when if you decide that, I'm going to give this a try and I'm going to go through and we're going to have a family discussion, right? The first step is to really consider the place where family members are in agreement and be very honest about places that there may be disagreement, especially when talking about any kind of loss, or if there is any kind of grief. Right? Doesn't necessarily need to be a consensus, but you really want to kind of have a clear understanding and that just overall appreciation for other perspectives, right? That can really help families move forward from a challenging situation with less stress. We also want to kind of solve that ambiguity with absolute thinking, right? And what do I mean by that? So, if the situation's unclear, right, you really want to try to go through and find some answers, right? So, a good example of this is if the way you've been earning for you're making your living is just not working anymore, right? You may have feelings and people saying that their entire lifestyle is lost, right? Some people may look at it and deny that there's absolutely anything wrong, right? In either one of those cases, kind of that absolute thinking isn't the answer, right? That's that kind of thinking in extremes. And it really can, that kind of yes or no can really kind of cause more trouble in the future, right? So in some situations, the answer really kind of lies in the middle, right? It's like, yes, something is lost, but something still remains. So have those discussion about what's in the middle. What's in that gray area? Different family members may have different middle places, and that's okay. You also want to make sure that you share with each other about what you believe you've lost, what it means to you, and how you feel about it, right? Feelings can sometimes be difficult things to tackle, right? It could be feelings of guilt, maybe shame, sadness, maybe even anger. And we want to make sure that you know that that may be a part of the conversation. You really want to make sure that you're listening to the feelings. Make sure that everyone gets a turn to share and keep judgment out of the conversation. Everyone should be listened to without criticism. Once feelings come out, once you're able to share them, they very often normally seem less overwhelming. So as you go back and you think together, um, and consider what has not been lost, right? Kind of shifting that focus a little bit. That really can kind of help open those gates or open those doors for you to identify your strengths or resources that could potentially be used in another way. Are there any kind of education or training that you and your family team have? Are there any obvious places to enhance training or use your skills and abilities in a new way? It's also important to go through and kind of examine those power structures in your family, right? We know those kind of power imbalances can really drive resentment and sometimes place an unnecessary strain on relationships. So, for your family unit, how is decision making shared? Does one person hold more knowledge or resource? We're kind of talking about looking towards those balanced partnerships, right? Because those really can support all members of the family in alleviating stress, gaining information and resources, and simply by handling the ambiguity of an uncertain future. You can also consider how each generation is influencing your family's ability and willingness to change. Sometimes farmers may feel pressure from elders or siblings, and that can interfere with their own updated knowledge. There's new ideas and trainings that may be rejected by some family members, which may actually limit opportunities for change. Just kind of going into a family conversation and being able to be open and honest about wants, needs, and fears can help alleviate these tensions. It's also important to share information with family and business members as much as possible. Children or maybe vulnerable persons may not need the details, but they should generally be kind of kept in queue to what people are worried about. That fear of the unknown or fear of not knowing can be worse than knowing the truth. Anyone who doesn't know facts will fill in the ideas on their own. That can actually be a little bit worse than reality. Not knowing or not having that kind of clear information can really freeze you and your family in place, right? Can even contribute to depression, anxiety, hypervigilance, and can even block that decision making. It's important when moving forward and deciding maybe you've set back and you've had those family conversations or you're planning on having those family conversations to kind of keep in mind about family and business boundaries, right? And what does that mean? There's always individuals that are part of the business and their opinions should be considered when making business decisions. But many farms are still steeped in that family tradition and history. So, family members who may not be an active part on the farm likely still have an interest in what's going on with the farm and do feel some kind of ownership over its legacy. In times of loss and in times where farms need to make big decisions, it really is critical to define who is in the family and who is in the business. quite often there's going to be some overlap. So even if your farm doesn't hire outside help, it's possible to have some family members that aren't considered business members, right? Kind of crossing into those gray areas. So when thinking about your who's in your family piece, right? Examine those family roles and rituals, right? It may have all generations involved, maybe including retired generations, current generations, incoming generations, right? And that simply goes and helps to recognize that this includes all individuals in the family, even those who may not play a current role. It's also important to consider the role of spouses and potentially in-laws when considering whom to include in those family meetings and what it means to all family members when someone is included or excluded from that meeting. So, just to consider if someone's not invited to a family meeting, is it sending the message that they're not viewed as a family member? So, many times, when you consider the individuals that constitute the farm business, many of them come from within the already defined family. Traditionally, those farm families have met to discuss those business things, right? Finances, crops, livestock management, maybe potential business changes. So, meetings on these topics are important, and the content is relevant for non-family farm employees also. So, when a year on the farm is really bad in terms of prices or productivity, it's not only affects the income, but also family and business relationships. It's kind of that stress that keeps on keeping, right? So those family members and those family meetings should be approached with openness and a willingness to listen to different perspectives, right? Respect that some may feel the outcome of the meeting is unfair to them personally. Others may just need time to process. They may find help through journaling or exercise or discussing the meeting with someone outside of the family. Again, to maybe get a different perspective. Returning to that meeting several days later to check back in and see if there's a need for follow-up or maybe even any kind of clarification can really help to reduce any resentment that may be developing. After that meeting can be a very important time too. Allow time for transition. Talk about a family plan. Talk about family celebrations. Talk about rituals. If times are hard, simplify them, but don't skip them. Continue to celebrate important family events. Continue to celebrate holidays as a family unit. Children are also very often the most creative about how to do this. No matter how little money there is, kids know how to have fun. So ask for their ideas. Also, identify when to have a meeting. Whenever there's change on the farm, the change has that kind of interpersonal dynamics. One farmer once said, if our farm expands from 200 dairy cows to 500, what does that mean for our family life, for our relationships? These decisions impact more than the bottom line. When looking at those meetings, you really want to go through and define the context of each meeting. So that's simply going through and labeling what's being experienced. Is it loss? Is it stress? Is it crisis? Is it anything else? Decide who should attend each meeting. Is it business? Is it family? Or are there people that act as both? Prepare the content for the business and the family meetings separately. Some things are going to overlap and some things won't. And that just helps go through and articulate and process and be able to identify goals and take the important steps to be able to get there with the family unit and with the business. You also want to do a little bit of preparing ahead for emotional processing, and that's sharing your emotions. pain, sadness, shame, guilt, but maybe even joy, relief, celebration. Prepare for decision making. Information will be key for decision making. Make sure that everyone at those meetings is receiving the same information so that they can respond to it and interpret it. You also want to set kind of those expectations for the meetings. And that may even be looking like setting some rules, right? No phones. That's a good one. None of those external distractions. Maybe not having side conversations so everybody's focused on the topic at hand, ensuring that everyone gets a chance to talk and uses respectful language. Maybe even have a plan for sharing ideas at a later time when people have had a chance to kind of let everything soak in that was discussed at that meeting. But then after the meeting, I think maybe one of the most important steps, building resilience. So for the family meetings, sometimes meetings aren't enough. Maybe professional help will need to be tagged in, especially for ailments that are mental or physical. Mental health concerns such as depression, addictions are serious business. You can't afford to wait. If those are issues, it is time to tag in a professional. For the business, there may be times when professional support will also be necessary, right? That you may need help to navigate troubled times or to soften difficult conversations. These kind of professionals include lenders, lawyers, accountants, or other consultants that can be a very important part of farm success. You can also make sure that you're kind of making meaning of the loss for the family. So, working with the family can help to make sense of losses or difficult times or stresses or crisis. But by talking together and listening to each other, you can try to find some meaning to help accept this ambiguity, the loss, and change. Make meaning of the loss for the business. It can look very different, but it does occur. Business members may need to process together or separately how to understand or make sense of what's happened and why. It's also important to keep a sense of humor. Your meetings don't always have to focus on serious business. Play, laugh together. Humor during difficult times, even in the midst of conflict and grief, is just as important and is a source of resiliency for many. Maybe have a family meeting and tell stories, play games, take outings together, plan some fun. Keep a sense of humor when the going gets tough. Sometimes laughing can ease the pain. Humor during difficult times, even in the midst of conflict and grief, is an important and source of resiliency for many. That's just a couple of tips that I wanted to share when going through and facing difficult times. Remember the family unit. Remember to have those open and discussions, but be prepared going in for those conversations. Set a plan, outline that plan, think about who needs to have a seat at the table, differentiate what needs to be discussed at a family meeting, what needs to be discussed at a business meeting. And then don't forget the follow up. Plan for fun, plan for uniting. When families are strong, farms will be strong. For more information on this and other topics affecting farms and farm families, you can always check out the Penn State Extension website at extension.psu.edu. We do have multiple resources available. All right, so I just want to thank you all for joining me and kind of listening to me talk a little bit about how to preserve that farm family unit in the midst of stress or crisis or even potentially loss. Please join us and our Farm Stress team for future episodes as we continue to discuss dealing with stresses. If you'd like more information on farm stress, please make sure to visit the Penn State Extension website at extension.psu.edu. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I look forward to hearing from you all soon. Bye bye.